Very good. Okay, and let me get going here with our slides. And here we go. Now, live coaching, our session today, using data to drive your action, using data to drive your action. So I have put together a structured approach to share some of these things. The first will be, we're going to talk about how to redefine the data problem. Then we're going to dive into a little bit of what it looks like to actually do data with excellence. We're going to talk about data that supports effective action. And we are going to also address how to solve the people problems along the way. So isn't it amazing if we can do all this in one session? That would be really something, wouldn't it? And then we'll, of course, bring it all together. I always like to start with the end in mind, with your next steps. I always like to keep you up to date on where we are in our coaching and launching new projects. We will likely be launching no more than 12 or 13 here in the remainder of 2023, based on our capacity at this point from my assessment. I've also asked Micah to join today to be following up with you from really now probably through August. This topic is so important and it is rather dense as well. He is going to be following up with you to kind of listen and learn and check in to try to understand more about what you are doing or not doing as it relates to data applied to your development efforts. And then also, of course, I want to make sure you know how to reach him. That's his email, and of course, how to reach me. I would think if you're joining this live coaching, you know how to reach me. I would imagine you're also getting text from me. So you should be getting pretty regular text to challenge you, encourage you along the way. If not, just text me at that number, enter your details, and it's really me. It goes right to my phone. I use a system to manage it a bit, which is why it'll respond asking for your info. But after that, it's all me. If you think of anyone else that you think would value that, let me know. We don't sell anything or promote things. We invite people like to live coachings. That's about it on the texting. Otherwise, I'm just trying to serve leaders. Now, here's what I've been hearing all my career. I've been involved in development now for 26 years. This is my 26th year in the fields of the Lord, is what I call it. I've heard this phrase all the time. We have a database problem. We have a database problem. And I'm always really interested in phrases that kind of become popular pop culture phrases. My least favorite one right now is, I know, right? I know, right? That's always humorous to me. But another one I've caught, and I can't figure out where this came from, although it's in a lot of movies and stuff, is when someone asks a question or someone makes a statement, there's this sarcastic response. Do you though? So we hear this all the time. We have a database problem. Do you though? I pondered this for a long time because I really thought that the problem was a database problem. One of the things I want to check here, forgive me, is I want to make sure that you can see me as I'm talking. So if someone could chime in on the chat, are you able to see me like in a little box or something? Let me know. Sorry to interrupt. Great. All right. It's not that you need to see me, but it might keep you, because I'm very funny to look at, it might keep you more engaged. Okay, good. On my screen, I'm seeing Micah's photo, which is just great, Micah. Thank you. Let me go back to our sharing here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's making my day. So you're like staring at me with this intense look. So the database problem, this is something I have struggled with and pondered for years. It goes back to working with my dad, who had a real non-gentle way sometimes of working with people. And he and I were working with a Christian school and a church together. He was working with the Christian school. I was working with the church. And we had been working with them for months. And each time he would go and visit them, he would come back very frustrated because they had not moved forward on hardly anything in their giving campaign. because they were having a database problem, is the way they put it. We were having a database problem. So this went on for several months. My dad told me on the way up there one month, together, he said, if they tell me that they have a database problem, if they tell me that again here on month 4, what I'm going to do is grab the nearest computer. This is back when computers were big boxes. He said, I'm going to grab the nearest computer and I'm going to throw it on the front lawn of the Christian school. And I'm going to say, now you have a database problem. So he was getting very frustrated. So I have fallen into that trap for years. The first decade of my work and then into serving as a director of advancement, I really was constantly looking at other databases. I even led a major change of database for us, which was the right thing to do for the entire organization. I was always looking at other things and thinking we need to be cutting edge in this area. And it wasn't until I really started serving more and more organizations through our coaching that I realized that it's actually not a database problem, because everyone seems to hate the database that they have, no matter what they have. Very, very few love the database that they have. It's more of even if they love it, it's a love-hate relationship. So what I've kind of discovered along the way is that we have to think differently about the data problem. In fact, I would say that it's not really a database problem that we have to address in development and leadership. So the solutions that we've kind of come up with here are, the first one, and we talk about this a lot inside our organization, is we've got to make sure that we stop, and if we can stop or find it, eliminate it, time telling, and start clock building. This is a concept that was developed by Jim Collins, who wrote Built to Last and Good to Great. And one of the things he points out in the book, Built to Last, is that leaders of organizations that are built to last and endure, somewhere along the way, shifted the focus more and more across the organization away from time telling, being able to look and tell how things are going right now, and more toward clock building. How do you build systems? How do you build a device that tells you the clock, tells you the time for a long, long time? So I find that an interesting way to tackle this problem of data. Second, it's really important to be aware of your trailing indicators, but you have to focus on your leading indicators. We talk about this a lot in coaching, that giving is always, always, always a trailing indicator. A record of what people have given, even yesterday, doesn't tell you how you're doing today. It tells you about the work you already done. Giving is really the result of the past months, year, or even years of work that affected that in some ways. So the temptation a lot of times is to get so oriented in terms of understanding what happened that we actually don't have much focus on what needs to happen. And so those are amazing. It's an amazing solution in your leadership to think about. Are we looking at trailing indicators? But how do we focus on leading indicators? So you don't want to ignore your trailing indicators. You want to be aware of them, but you want to focus on your leading indicators. The number 3 kind of solution here to the database problem is out of sight, out of mind. You've all heard this statement, out of sight, out of mind. It took me forever to figure this out. Sorry, I've got a little dog in my office. She's fussing at me. Out of sight, out of mind isn't just a phrase, it's a reality, right? In terms of how the human brain works. So one of the things I didn't realize until more recent years is that a database is literally out of sight and out of mind. It's all in there. It's all, even if the information isn't extremely well built out, it's in the database and you have to get it out to use it. So we talk a lot about creating a line of sight, So don't have it out of sight, out of mind. Create a line of sight to the information that matters for you to take action. And then, as I already said, people dislike whatever database they have at the moment. Often even they hate whatever they have, no matter what system they have. So what does that say about technology as the solution to this problem? And what we found is that it's not. Even with all the advances of technology and data, that the problem is not the database, it is a people problem, because people have to manage the information. People have to have wisdom and experience and expertise to know what information even matters. And then they have to know how to get it out in usable ways. This idea that the technology is built in a way that helps us do the right things is nonsense. You have to have wisdom, because this is a people-oriented work. And you have to have people who understand these challenges. So it's a people problem, like almost everything in development, not a database problem. So a good way to think about this whole out of sight thing is, out of sight means you will soon go out of your mind, because you don't know what in the world's going on and you don't know what to focus on. You feel constantly overwhelmed, constantly pulled in all these different directions. And so data will not solve that. But when you can get the data out of your mind and out of wherever it's stuck and into a line of sight, then you will really see a big, big difference. So that is the data problem defined differently. Now, I'm going to pause a second and get this fussy dog out of my way so you have my full attention here. I don't want her to distract you with her background comments. So let me do that real quickly. I'll be right back. Hold on one second. Micah, maybe you could chime in and say hello for a second. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Zach. First of all, for those of you who don't know, I am told I'm supposed to say this, that it is Zach's birthday today. So give him a happy birthday in the chat, if you will. But he's exactly right where we're going with this, that we're not looking at solving a database problem. We're looking at people problems. And I'll talk a little bit about what kind of person does really well organizing data later on.
There you go. It helps if you wear cool glasses if you're dealing with data. That's for sure. So sorry for the interruption. Bella was chiming in too often with her snarky comments, so that's distracting. So the second piece, what does it look like to do this with excellence? Okay, this is the thing. It's one thing to talk about a problem. What are the solutions? I want you to see and know what are the things that actually matter, because again, there's no technology that we've seen that really does this. So here's the leadership challenge with all of this that I want to clarify for you. This is why this can be an issue. The leadership challenge here is having greater access to information doesn't guarantee better decisions and action. Having greater access to information doesn't guarantee better decisions and action. This is intuitive if you pay attention at all to our world. We have access now to more information than any other point in history, and tomorrow we will have access to even more information. But in no way does that seem to be creating a culture where we make better decisions and take substantive action. So this is the huge challenge as we look at data, is that it isn't what kind of database do you use? It is what information matters so that you can make better decisions and take action. Now, real quickly, in my memory, this isn't what it actually looked like in real life, but in my memory, this is what it looked like. So some of you are younger, far younger than I am, but where I began to learn how to use data in development was really before databases were common. I was a development assistant as a freshman in college, hired in the School of Music where I was a student because they knew my dad and his reputation. I think they thought they would get free advice or something if I worked as a development assistant. So that was my very first job outside of playing piano, was working for a development director and the dean of the School of Music on their development projects. And I learned a whole lot during that time. One of my very first things that I was ever assigned to do, I think it was like day 2 of my work, was to basically run what you would now call a report from a database, except it wasn't a database. It was a file room that in my memory looks like this. It wasn't quite that bad. But I mean, think about how things have changed. I was given a list, handwritten, of names of past donors that were a priority. It was a lengthy list. And then I was given a security pass to go up to the Hall of Records and be given access to all these rows and rows and piles of file cabinets and file drawers and boxes and all this. And the assignment was to take that list and to pull as much information as I could from those records, updated mailing address, and make notes on past interactions with these donors. And then that was going to inform our scheduling of face-to-face meetings and our invitations to those people, in that whole semester of work. So the ability to do that these days is so much faster and theoretically more efficient. But what I've noticed is if you didn't grow up doing this work in a way that looked like that, you might have missed along the way the opportunity to know what it looks like to actually do development with excellence using data as a support to that. Donor data is a support to your work. So this is what a system of success actually looks like at the simplest level. Number one, that the entry of donations and preparing receipts is happening within 24 business hours. Whether that's an online receipt or printed receipt, the donation is entered and a receipt is sent or prepared within 24 business hours from the time that it comes in. It's easier to do that these days with technology, but I'm shocked at how that is not the norm. So that is not the normal excellence we would see. Now, there's a lot of experts out there that get hung up on like, send the receipt within this amount of time, et cetera. I'll talk a little bit later about why we don't encourage people to worry about that so much. But what we say is get the donation entered, get the receipt ready within a 24-hour business day period. Second, weekly reports designed for action and awareness. Okay, you need to know weekly and have the information in front of you with the things you need to know to take action weekly. It's an awareness, remember, awareness of the trailing indicators and a focus on the leading indicators. That's weekly reports. Monthly scorecards. You want to have monthly scorecards that focus you on the people who are giving and the people who haven't yet given. That needs to be a monthly scorecarding approach. We would encourage you to have, and again, with excellence, monthly reconciling with accounting. What donors do and give isn't the way it's necessarily accounted for. And that can create the problems that pile up over the course of a year or even years. Those go away to almost nothing when that's reconciled every month, where the donor development person or people, if you have one, are reconciling that information with the accounting person or people. If you're a one woman, one man organization, then you're the one that's having to do both. But that's what excellence looks like, and it will grow with you. It will scale with you. Number 5, end of year statements for givers and a yearly scorecard for real development work. So these are two different things, but they're done at the same time, which is January. So we recommend not only sending a receipt when donations are made, but a end of the year statement of all the gifts made to a donor in the past year. And that's given to the giver. The yearly scorecard is for you to know at a high level, overall year, cumulative year, calendar year of work, what has actually happened. And that tells you where you're going next. Number 6, in terms of excellence, is a minimum effective dose of internal usage of the data. Minimum effective dose. I put an asterisk here because I wanted to comment on this a little bit. I see this idea that has taken hold and it's been taught for years, which is everything needs to be in the database. If it's not in the database, it didn't happen. If you talk to someone, you need to have extensive notes. If you meet with someone, you need to have extensive notes. And in a perfect world, I completely agree. The problem is we live in the real world, and in the real world, the tenure of heads of organizations often is rather short. The tenure of directors of development is even shorter, 2 to 3 years. 3 years would be, beyond 3 years would be an amazingly stable development program. And so there is, and the idea is, well, if we keep all these records, then no matter what happens with staffing, then we'll be okay. And no, because a giver doesn't care how good your records are or aren't. What they care about and trust are the people that they're interacting with. So there's a lot of energy put on sort of this maximum level desire to have all this information written down and in records in a world that people aren't sticking long enough. So to focus on the numbers that really matter, retention of donors, growth of giving leads to retention of staff and a growing team, which will maintain a healthy development approach. Recording information in the database in detail, it can be distracting from the things that actually matter. So what you want to have is a minimum effective dose, not ignore it, but minimum effective dose. And number 7, as I've already mentioned, you want a line of sight. You don't want the database to be out of sight. I am amazed in our coaching how often I will ask people very simple questions and they'll say, I don't know, I'll have to go look at our database and find out. And that right off the bat tells us something, that they are not focusing on the actions to take going forward because they don't have that information in front of them. So that's what we want to show you and talk a little bit more about in the rest of our teaching here. Here's a profound kind of realization I had about 7 years ago, I think 8 years ago, that we've never seen an out-of-the-box database able to give you the actual numbers you need to make excellent decisions in development. Never. Now think about the amount of systems out there selling themselves for donor development. We've never seen out of the box a system that will give you the actual numbers. They all have the info in them and they have some helpful information that they'll put in front of you, but I've never seen it. What we have seen are ministry organizations transform themselves by seeing their perspective transformed and then their giving transformed by building and utilizing an organizational scorecard. So the scorecard that gives you that line of sight, that's what's transformational. So I'm going to show you different ways that we do that here. So this is where, if you've tuned out or you're going to get another cup of coffee or whatever, please tune back in, because I'm going to show you quite a bit of worksheets in Google Sheets or Excel. And if you're not a numbers person or data, this can immediately be overwhelming. But if you'll just bear with me, I'm going to point out how each of these pieces fits together into this system for success. Okay. And if you just will kind of get over the initial anxiety, I think you'll be really kind of amazed at what you see. And it'll be affirming where you're already doing this. And it will, if it's not something you're already doing, it'll provide you some focus. Okay. So data that supports effective action looks like this. Remember, I mentioned weekly. So what we encourage people to do is build out a weekly comparison report. And the weekly report is the reality of what's happened this week. I don't know about you, but on my calendar, there's normally 52 weeks in a year. And so this is something that we came upon through experimentation with leaders that we work with. And what I found is that often they don't know the giving so far in the year, but the team or the leader doesn't really know the context of it. So I know this is overwhelming. There's a lot of rows, but just take a moment, lean in and look at this. Okay. What you'll see here is 2023, right on the left side, 2022 on the right side. We're going downward week by week, starting with week 1 in the year, all the way down. And what you can see if you follow across from week 1 is the dates of that week. The count is the number of donations, the sum of those donations, and then the cumulative sum, which goes up as you move through time each week, right? And then you would see the same exact information for the previous year. So you have a week-to-week comparison of giving. Now, why does this matter? It doesn't matter because if you had 41 donations this week totaling a certain amount, and then you look last year on this week and you're off, you go, oh, who are we missing? It typically, it can't be that granular to worry about and move. What it does, if it does nothing else, is this changes your behavior week after week. When you're ahead of the previous year, there's a sense of momentum and energy and clarity. When you're behind, you start asking questions. This particular organization is one that we support by providing this kind of work. We have a data and systems support team and approach that we do. Whether you're working with us or not, though, it would be well with you to build this out or something like it. So they're able to see the pace week to week. You're able to see the number of donations week to week comparison. But then this is what's even more helpful. If you look down at the bottom of the report, see all these tabs? These are dates going back in time of the weeks, right? So every week, this same report is being updated with not only the total, and see, we can go all the way through week 52. So you can see where they are on this one, 308,000 compared to the previous year, where they ended up. You could also, I would also point out this particular organization cumulatively, if you look there on line 23, cumulative giving, 308,000 compared to last year's cumulative giving of 666,000. Now, should they be concerned? I don't know, but I promise you, if they were looking at this every week, they would ask a lot of questions. They would make sure that they knew what were the larger gifts that might have been missing. And when you put these in, take these out, what's the actual what's happening here? Now, back to the tabs. If you look here, I'm going to, as I click through, you're going to see it shift just as if you were in Google Sheets or Excel to this different tab. Now, this then shows that week, the most recent week, exactly who gave. So this is weekly in front of you. Here's who gave this week. Here's who was a new donor. Here's who was a retained donor. Here's what's a monthly gift. Here's what's a gift toward a multi-year commitment. If you regained a giver, you would see that as well. This then, these receipts have already been prepared. Remember, in 24 business hours, sent. If it's email, that's instantly. If it's mail, that gets a little bit out. But if you know, follow our teaching at all, you know the answer to this question: what's the most important thing to do when someone makes a gift? Above the receipt, above the thank you letter, all that stuff, what's the most important thing to do? Pick up the phone and call them and say thank you. So I've blocked out the specifics here, but you've got name, amount, phone number, email, all that right in front of you. And of course, when this was entered into the system. So those calls are able to be made right there. That takes pressure off the receipt and lets them know. The thing is, of course, they're experts. Oh, that needs to be done in 24 hours. That needs to be done in a 48-hour period, everything. I just want it done at this point. I just want it done. Most organizations aren't doing anywhere close to that. So if you can operate with this weekly awareness, you will be amazed at how people react, because no other organization they're giving to, I promise, is doing this at this level. So if you move forward through these tabs, again, you're going week to week, and you would see each week the same information. So what matters, this is what I'm talking about line of sight. So you can just move right through. This is what I'm talking about, line of sight. What matters is not only the pace. Are you doing this week what's going to move you forward? You need to be aware of that, but you also need to be aware of the actual people so you can take actual action. It's not enough to say, oh, we want to call people who give, and we do that when we remember to do it. It has to be in front of you. So that's the weekly comparison with the information to take action. Remember, it's not out of sight. It's right in front of you. Yearly scorecard. Now, the yearly scorecard, this can also be overwhelming. This is the numbers that matter as trailing indicators. And most people, most organizations, even if they learn this, struggle to do this once a year. We do this every month and would love to see you do that as well. But if you look here, the middle section where you see these dark lines, these are the most important numbers: total giving, number of pledges, outstanding pledge amount, monthly giving, how many monthly giving commitments are there in place. And then up at the top here, total number of donors, number retained, number regained, number of new. So I could take the whole rest of our time and go through all these details, But I just want to point out a few things here. See, this is progressing every month. So they can see the way their total number of donors is going up so far this year. How many of those have been were retained from the previous year? How many of those are regained? This organization has already regained 7 donors this year. And then they have 9 new, right? They have a fundraising program here. So we have pulled out their readathon numbers. You can see the gift sizes in terms of percentages. And then they see, of course, a comparison to the previous year. Now, what's amazing is when you've been doing this over time, you can go back to each month of each year as well. But remember, all this is trailing indicators, which you need to be aware of for sure. But it's the numbers that you need to focus on. That's the challenge. What are we looking for there? Well, we have to look at the people. So why the scorecard approach is so powerful is behind every number is a list of people who've done real things or have not yet taken action as donors. So again, following the same tabs, if you look down here, total numbers, remember back on the score, I'm sorry, total donors, back on the scorecard, there's total donors. And here they are listed so far, largest gift to smallest gift, not alphabetically, not through time, largest gift to smallest gift. And then the number that's been retained. Here are the people who've actually been retained. I blocked off some of these because they would be business names that you might be able to find. So I want to, because this is very real data, I'm protecting all the particulars. But see, again, all the actionable information is here, phone, email, all that. So donors retain, donors regain. They've already regained some donors, remember, this year. So that's this list. You could see their past giving. So look, they had an entire year skipped, and they've regained these people. Those are huge wins, huge wins. And look at the size of some of those gifts. And then we have what? New donors, size of gifts there. And then the donors to retain yet. So I want to point out something here. Most leaders, until you've learned this and been confronted with it, the database kind of gives you this impression that the data is always changing and we got to go do these searches and we got to go do these reports. The reality is, no, these lists just get smaller as a year. You start the year with a donor to retain list. Everyone who gave last year, you want to see them give again. So this list should be getting smaller. It changes, but it only gets smaller. So that, again, keeps you focused. Regains the same way. People who gave in previous years, 21 or prior, but not since. This list should be getting smaller as you regain some. The new donor, the non-donor list, these are people that have never given anything. This is usually the largest list that you have. And again, it's not changing. You're selecting people from that to focus on to recruit. And then here's another one, people who give less. Could we agree that if someone is giving less than previous years, that might be telling us something that we need to pay attention to? All the time, people go, we need to go look in the database. We need to run a search. This should be in front of you. Who is decreasing their giving? They gave, yay, but they gave less. We need to be aware of that so we can be curious. Who gave more? Who increased their giving from previous years? We want to have a reaction to that. Now, I know that's a lot. The great news is these slides, because I've protected the private information here, you can be reviewing these later. If you have a better way of doing this, I would love to hear it, but I would love to see you work toward this. This is far more possible than you realize if you take the time. Now, a couple things, and then we're going to dig into questions. We're going to have Micah and Loren make a few comments. Just to remind you how this fits in the bigger picture. I've never shown this before. This is a Google search, Google Trends last year. Every year looks just like this, of the search term, how to raise money. You could also look up how to fundraise or fundraising ideas. They all follow this exact same curve. This curve is one more reflection of the seasons of the year as it relates to giving behaviors. Giver behaviors have been shaped over decades of time in this country, driven by the pressing needs that organizations have. So I find this rather humorous. Look at, it's rather low and innocuous in January, and more searches go up into April, May, and then June begins trending down. The lowest point then becomes July 4th, middle of July, right around there. And then these questions, how do we raise money? How do we raise money? Start going up. They fall out completely right around Thanksgiving, and then hit high demand again until the last 2 weeks of the year. It's fascinating, fascinating. So this is another way of realizing that the giving year operates in seasons. If you are trying to accomplish a huge amount in the month of July, unless you've trained your donors really well over decades, it's really hard. June, July, you need to be following up and wrapping up at that point in the year. And to think about where this peak focus, peak language is occurring by the end of April, we want to be a bit ahead of these trends. So this shows up over and over in different ways, but you've heard us talk about seasons. So everything just to fit this into what we teach, you have donors to retain, donors to regain, and donors to recruit. You select strategies for them, face-to-face, small group, large group. And what I'm trying to show you today is you have to have the information in front of you, an awareness and who to focus on. You also have these 3 strategies, right? I'm just reminding you about these things. And then the donor journey. Who are we thanking? Who are we reporting? Who are we asking? Who are we following up on? You have to have the lists in front of you, not out of sight, line of sight. And then all that fits together. So I'm not taking time on this because you've probably heard this from me in many different ways before, but I'm putting the slides here so you can remember how it all fits in. Now, remember what I said, this isn't a database problem, it's people problems. And so what I'm really interested in doing is you meeting a couple of people that really can address this. So the 2 questions that we think about a lot, because they're your leadership challenges, what does this look like day to day to actually do this? Because this is a lot. You're probably sitting here going, I can't do this. What does it look like to do it day to day? And then what kind of person does it actually take? And so that's why I asked Micah and Loren to join. So very, very briefly, because I took longer than I thought to go through those details. But briefly, Micah, if you would chime in here on these 2 questions. And then Loren, I think, also can maybe share in her unique way what it looks like to do this day to day, what kind of person you're looking for. Go ahead, Micah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to go through sort of some of the key indicators of the people who really do this well. So I'm going to be talking about the people problem here and how to solve that. Just a few things here. And these are a little bit funny at first, and then I'll get serious. So the first thing is that they use spreadsheets to solve everything literally in their life. So they're running their family, they're running their household, or they're planning their vacations, or they have an inventory of their groceries. These are the kinds of things you would look for in someone who really would do well at this kind of work. They hate seeing this little thing right here. Any of you guys ever seen this? That is, they hate it. They hate it. It drives them crazy, and they will go to great lengths to solve that problem. If you don't know what that is, that's because it's not you. You're not the right person to be doing all the data mining and all that sort of stuff. They have a spreadsheet to manage all their spreadsheets, to tell them where their spreadsheets are and to link to different things. They list Google Sheets or Excel as a hobby in their online presence. So on Facebook, if you went and looked at their hobbies from their old account that was active 10 years ago, it will say Google Sheets or Excel. Or a modern way of saying that is that they now have a TikTok account, and it's full of Excel gurus. And it's anonymous, and they just watch these Excel gurus and geek out over it. Another one would be that they love the equals sum formula, and they actually trust it more than a calculator, because that information could be used more and more and more and taken from here and put into this cell and put into this sheet, those sorts of things. And if you're not getting any of this, I get it. That just means that you're probably not the right person for this kind of work, but you should have someone for this kind of work. Also, they really enjoy fine art. This is the kind of fine art that they are just into. So they love these sorts of things. If you can't see that, if you don't know what that is, there's like individually colored cells in an Excel sheet that make up a fine art piece. Or I found the perfect costume for the next time they attend a costume party or even show up to an interview. Might be what they show up in.
Uh,
So if you don't know what that is, that again tells me you're not the right kind of person. But I'm pretty sure Loren wore something like this to her first interview. And if you don't know what that is, it's a pivot table, which is a function inside of Sheets and Excel, those sorts of things. So these are some of the more funny things. But seriously, on a serious note, there are a few things that you would automatically already know. Is that they're analytical. They're often type A. They trust numbers because numbers don't lie. Numbers tell a truth. When they take a skills test surrounding this sort of stuff, they say that was fun. That was fun, which is so foreign to most of us. They're a fixer. Like I said, if they see that div O problem or div 0 problem in an Excel sheet or something, they're going to want to fix it. They're going to want to get to the bottom of it and figure out what's going on there. And another thing is they don't really thrive on ambiguity. And they believe that you deserve to know the truth about your numbers because it tells a story and it tells you what is actionable and what you can do to change that truth. So those are some of the things that I would say are part of what we look for in the kinds of people who do well in this role.
That's really helpful, Micah. As I said, it's not a technology problem, it's a people problem. And the moment we shifted for that focus is that let's treat this not like a software problem, although we have software we use and recommend. We're very neutral about it over the long haul. But the requirement is the kind of person this takes. And also investing in this area at the right time. Which some of you might have some questions about, and I could speak to that. But there's a time at which none of this makes much difference at all. But doing this at the right time, the right season, the right step for your organization, it's profound, especially over long haul. The other thing I would add to that list, though, Micah, is that I look for people with what I call the gift of anxiety, basically that it makes them anxious for this to not be done right and not be done well. And the day that I realized that this is not me, although I have the gift of anxiety too, it's just applied differently, that this is not me, that there are people who would love to get involved in this. That was when I started making much better decisions about the volunteers to involve or even hiring staff to involve. So speaking of the gift of anxiety, let me reintroduce Loren on our team. Hey, Loren. So
Hi.
yeah, we've got to hear, like, what is it like to be you? Because you're this kind of person. And then what does it really look like day to day? If you said, here's just a few things to know of what it really takes.
Right. I've never felt so called out. And I laugh. I'm so happy that this was on mute because I literally was laughing out loud at some of the things like, yes, that is me. I have all the spreadsheets up all the time. It is fun for me. I geek out. I am part of these super secret fun groups where I am constantly like coordinating with people like in India, trying to figure out super like interesting Excel problems and Google problems. And yes, I get on and I love to just geek out over YouTube videos of doing like Excel and Google Sheet things that are just fun and magical, in my opinion. I'm like, look, it's magic that this is all happening. So yes, that is me. It can be very overwhelming for most people when you're looking at all the data and the numbers, and they all can kind of, if you don't have the right brain for it, they all kind of just merge into one cell at some point. And I can see how that can be for a lot of people. But for me, I really enjoy really getting in there and extracting the information that is needed and useful. Every day I spend time in the database, entering in, for entering the donations, and then taking out that information weekly and building the reports Zach was speaking on. That day, for me, is a fun day. It's an interesting day, but for most people, yes, it can be extremely overwhelming. And I don't know how else to say it, because like it just takes me back to the story I was talking about. I feel like when somebody had asked me, what do I do? I started to tell them and they said, oh, wait, that sounds really boring. That sounds really boring. And so I'm like, I don't want to bore you with all of the
Yeah.
spreadsheet talk, but I don't know what to say specifically.
Well,
Zach,
well,
help
you
me out
said a
here.
few, just to clarify a few things. I mean, you referred to it as fun. I think that's important because most of the people in this meeting probably would not use that word to describe it. I've heard you say that it's soothing to you, which I think really interesting because for me or for most people, just learning how to understand all those different sheets and the actions I need to take, that's stressful. That's challenging until I get that clear. And so the idea that someone else will look at all that and find that to be calm, that the process of pulling that and updating it. And then the other thing you said is every day. I think that's the other thing I see is people think this is something they can circle around to or have team members that do this along with other stuff. I would rather people do nothing like what we've shown than try to just get, oh, we're going to get a little bit better at data. I would rather say, don't even worry about it until you reach certain levels of giving, because to really see the gains from it over time, it's a daily thing. It's absolutely a daily thing. So you mentioned daily too, which I appreciate. And then I love the fact, I think you also have to find people that are interested enough in this that they are constantly learning, because yeah, there is this whole other world of people who are stretching these softwares to the limit and all that. Whereas leaders will look and go, why are there so many sheets? I just want it on one thing like that. No, it cannot be that way. That's kind of like saying, oh, it's all in the database. It's out of sight. So it takes someone like you, I think. And my life began to be a lot more joyful when I began to discover there are people that really love this kind of thing and can really get to work with it. So thank you, Loren. Okay, so I'm going to let you drop off video and we're going to turn it over to questions. Usually there's tons of time for questions, so I will stay a little longer if there are people who want to do that. Questions, though, you could put in the chat, you could put in the Q&A, and I'm also love to call out people as well and put you on the spot. So who has a question they'd like to start with? You could also raise your hand and I can call on you here. So question in the chat, Q&A. While you're thinking, now's your chance. Let's see. Let me put, oh, Lisa Straw, great to see your name on here. Let me ask, okay, Cheryl's asking a question. We'll start with her, and then I'm going to pick on Jill Van Howling. I'm going to put you on the spot. So here's a couple of questions, and then Jill, I'm coming for you. So I'll allow you to talk in a second. Okay, so Cheryl asked, would you suggest running the report calendar year, fiscal year? Oh my gosh, I'm glad you asked that question because I didn't make that clear. Always, always, always calendar report. The only time you should be looking at fiscal reports is when you're trying to reconcile the accounting, trying to square up with where you are in your fiscal year budget. When you're doing real development work with real givers, you have to be thinking and operating on a calendar year. And most organizations do have an offset fiscal year. So that can feel a little confusing until you get used to it. But yes, giving year, calendar year. The fiscal year, the way to think about fiscal year is it's just a milestone in the giving year. And for most, it ends at the end of June or end of July. Remember that curve I showed you, which is problematic. So view it like a midpoint in your giving year or a milestone to hit in your giving year, not the start and end of the development work. That will really work against a culture of giving over the long haul. Sally Meeks asks, is there a specific software that meets some of the needs you might have? Yes, the only system we recommend, the only one. For years, I wouldn't even recommend one because remember, everyone hates what they have. So the only system that we recommend, oh, Jill says she might not be able to connect to audio. Okay, that's okay. I'll go to someone else. The only one we recommend is Kindful. That is also recently merged with a system called Bloomerang, which I also feel confident in recommending as well. So for most organizations, until your giving begins to exceed $2 million a year, you would be best served by using a system like that, or even just Google Sheets. And I know that sounds really contrary to what everyone's trying to sell you on, but we see it all the time. So Kindful or Bloomerang, for most, you start getting into the 2 million or more a year giving, then there's some other things. Yeah, Kathy, I saw you're on here too. So I hope that helps, Sally. Let's see, Kathy, do you track contacts with donors in the database? Yes, but it's a minimum effective dose. That's what I was talking about there, minimum effective dose. So I would rather contact be made than worry about whether or not the contacts are recorded. I would rather many of these other things to be focused on and driving than every note. But so what you have to do is find a minimum effective level. Do you want to see that they were called and thanked? I would rather know that you lose your job if we aren't calling and thanking people. But if you need to see that, more helpful would be if the note, I would view minimum would be face-to-face meeting notes, something basic like that. There are other ways to create that trail now with technology that aren't really having to be put in the database. But I try to stay out of telling people what all that should look like, but instead say find and keep struggling to find the minimum effective dose of what you put into the database as it relates to contact and notes. Man, a lot of questions coming. Let me jump over to the Q&A and then I'll come back to the chat. Let's see. Are there weekly and or yearly scorecard templates you would recommend available online? Troy, I haven't seen any online. These are things that we've built. I'd be glad to share with you some examples that we have. If you just would email me or Micah at developmentandleadership.org, be glad to share those with you. We have some examples that could help. Dan says, if I'm a development director and do not have these loves, I need to find help. I need a teammate who can help me with this. Yeah, so there's some rambling there, but really insightful. I'm gonna put you on the spot here in a minute, Dan. Hold on a second. David says, please explain a little more detail what an ideal minimum effective dose is. Yeah, so just a little bit more there. Dan, if you'll hang up here, hang on. I'd love to get to that question. Minimum effective dose means that there is no point in putting any information in that database that isn't going to be utilized in very real development work. Perfect example. When I started as a director of advancement, coming out of the consulting world, the first day I was asking questions of the person who was sort of managing development up to that point. And he was doing the data stuff too. He was doing a little bit of everything. And he was entering information into the database. I said, hey, what's that you're putting into the database? He goes, oh, well, what I do every year is I take all the addresses of all of our donors and I search their house value and I put that in the database. And there are experts who would tell you, he got that from some seminar, that that's what you should do. I have found zero correlation between someone's house value and their willingness to give, like zero. So it's interesting, entertaining information, but having that in your database is completely useless to the real work of development. So I immediately, not that day because I just started, but got us out of that really, really quick. So you're looking for putting the information in that's useful in the real work. And the notes, the simplest form of the notes, like what do we want to really treasure and know about this person? Their children's names, their grandchildren's names. That might be an example of things that are actually useful. When you have, I don't think every meeting has to be noted in there. I don't understand that time and energy being put in that. That's time and energy you could be spending in getting your next meeting. So the meaningful meetings, the meetings where decisions were made, were key pieces of information that you want to shepherd and steward over the long haul. If you think about like stewardship of the information of the relationship, I am going to put Dan on the spot, Dan Bragg, and then there's some other questions. So I'll keep asking questions as long as y'all hang in here. I have the time today for this and normally like to spend at least 20 minutes or so on questions. So Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're asking an interesting question. allow to talk. You should be able to take yourself off mute now. Dan.
Hello.
Hello. So clarify your questions for me. And you had it's a
So
comment in
yes.
there too, which I thought was helpful.
I guess I'm trying to put together the fact that as a development director, probably my gift set is I love people. I love talking to people. I love talking about the mission and the vision of the organization. And now the sense that I get from this seminar is I better get with it in my understanding of data and working with data. So if these are two potentially things that are very different from one another and are not contained in the same person, I'm obviously going to need some help. And yet I'm in a small organization and I'm not sure how to start all that. Am I just doomed for failure out of the gate?
No. So I'm getting your point now. This is excellent. So I'm going to put you back on mute. I think what I'm about to say will encourage you and many others. Okay. Improving data until you are well beyond 2 million a year in giving. Improving data has incremental long-term gains for your organization. Incremental long-term. There is nothing that you can do when you are below 2 million a year in giving that this year will move in a major way due to use of data. Nothing. It's action that counts. It's action that counts. So the takeaway for someone like you, Dan, is, okay, number one, I do need to understand the lists that they're talking about, because you can have these lists handwritten. Donors to retain, donors to regain, donors to recruit. You can have them on a Google spreadsheet yourself. That starts you on the journey of what I call self-healing data, where you're becoming increasingly effective in shepherding the relationships, and you have the information needed to do that well. So it starts you on the journey. And then as you move toward that, you're constantly seeing giving grow. Then you start adding these skills to your team. Maybe you outsource it, like that's what we do for numerous clients. Maybe you do a part-time person for a little while, and you're always getting a little bit better. So what I've shown you here is sort of what excellence looks like. And what you can do is be on the road to that. And you want to always be careful. If you try to, we don't ever take on challenging people to improve their data in the first year of working with them and coaching, because it could be immediately better and it's going to have zero major impact. It'll be incremental. So it can be a distraction. So what we've shown you here, everything we've shown you is so structured that if you just say, okay, it's the list of these different groups that matter, and that's what I need to understand and grab a hold of at this point. And then you just keep building that over time. And so again, it's minimum effective dose. Knowing all of this helps you know what numbers matter. And then what you want to do is just do a little bit better at this, Dan, because it will have a little bit of an impact. Your other comment, I would say, for everyone here is why it's so important to grow this as a capacity in a team over time. Because if you are effective with people, any time you're spending on the data is time that is lower value time. Because what you do with people is what possibly God will use to move them to make giving decisions. So you need the data. That's why we call it a line of sight. You don't need to be spending time figuring all that out. It needs to be in front of you. And what we try to do when people are just starting out is let's just get what you can trust, what you can know in front of you. That's your line of sight. And then you just keep developing it as you're developing your organization. So I'm really glad you brought up that question, Dan. Let's see. Tamara says she's just starting to put these types of systems reports together. What would you say is most important for me to set up first? Setting up first would be probably two things: your donors to retain and regain list, because that's your whole world. People who gave last calendar year and people who gave prior but didn't give last calendar year. So donors to retain is last calendar year. Donors to regain is prior, but not last calendar year. If you do those two lists well in real development work, your giving will grow every time, with no new donors. So those are the two lists to get right first. And then second, some form of a weekly comparison report where no more than a week is going by before someone's picking up the phone and calling. So those receipts are quick. And more importantly, that phone call is quick. So if you start there first, everything else is secondary. So the other things are important, but less so to those two. You got to be able to call and say thank you, and you've got to be able to be a steward of the donors to retain and see some regained. Cheryl, and really good questions here. I'm shocked that this topic is so interesting to people. That's really encouraging, Loren. Maybe there's more folks like us than we think here. Cheryl asks, are our seniors going on a mission trip last year? The checks received or considered donations, would you include them in the report? Yeah, so it's a great question. It comes up a lot at Christian schools. Yes, that's a restricted gift is what that's known. It's restricted for specific purposes. I see a lot of Christian schools make the mistake of going, oh, those don't count. They count profoundly because they tell you who might be a giver. Okay, just because someone paid for their child through that donation to go on a mission trip doesn't mean they're a giving person, but it's likely that they are. So it's something to be aware of. It's something to thank and acknowledge. It's a way to start a relationship. Oftentimes in a Christian school, parents will give to things like that because their child is involved before they'll give to anything else. And so it's a start of a relationship. It's the start of an interaction. So I think it's important to record that. In your yearly scorecarding, if you want to denote some of that, that's fine. But usually it's such a small total amount relative to the overall total giving. And yeah, I see Alicia saying she keeps a missions donation list so she can reach back out later. That's wise, very wise. When someone gives to anything, in a perfect world, you'd want to be aware of it because I see, well, they bought a smoothie. We don't consider that a donation. Well, I don't consider it a donation either. I'd rather you not sell smoothies and call it donations, but I guarantee you the person who bought the smoothie thinks they made a donation. That's what matters because that tells you a little something about that person to build and then building a relationship from there. So again, that's an extreme example, but Alicia asks if splitting the list of donors with the head of school and assist, I assume a basic sheet of who's covering which and keeping that updated so we aren't over contacting. Yes. So what's great when you have, Alicia, just the simplicity of a donors to retain list, sorted largest gift to smallest, and our donors to regain list, sorted largest gift to smallest going back in time. These are things I showed you. When you have that, you can assign someone to be responsible for that relationship, sort of, again, shepherding that relationship or a steward of that relationship. And so I see a lot of times people keep all these various lists, and that's fine, whatever works, but you have to have a system of having that, again, that line of sight. And that's what I've tried to show you here. So any of those lists that you've seen, what most of the time leaders will do is they'll put assignments on those for a season. Okay, in this 6 months, here are my assignments, or this year, these are my assignments as well. Those are things that we see. So good question. And I'm not seeing any other questions come in. I only put one person on the spot. Dan, thank you for that. So we're a little over time. So we probably got time for one more question. And then, man, look at all, I mean, most people stayed with us. This is great. Thank you. Very good. Looks like people are probably overwhelmed enough. Obviously, this is a big topic. Knowing what to work on when is key, just like some of the questions are brought out. This is why Micah has volunteered to be following up with you. So watch your email or even your phone. he'll reach out to you from now through, I think, August. We really want to try to help you apply this, right, Micah? So please don't ignore his phone calls and emails when he calls. He's not trying to pitch you on something. He wants to understand as much as possible. We want to understand where you are at this point, what this is looking like for you at this point. If there are ways that we can help, we'll speak up about that. Just like someone was asking for some examples. Yeah, those are things that we'd be glad to share. So yeah, great to be with you all today. Thank you, Micah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Loren. This was Loren's debut, I think, on a live coaching. So we're going to give her a big hand. And thank you all for the happy birthday wishes. I should have mentioned that earlier. I was like, what are all these things in the chat box when I got back on? So somebody let the cat out of the bag. So thank you for that. Y'all are making a great birthday. I can't imagine anything more fun to get to do on my birthday, but to try to equip leaders to do this well. So good to be with you all. And we will follow up with the recording and the slides, and shoot us an email or Micah if you want examples of anything as well. All right. I'll see y'all soon. Bye now.